Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Raising Healthy Mothers. Today, I am excited to welcome Louisa Daubney to talk about the art of time management for busy, overgiving women, which I think many mums will totally identify with. Welcome, Louisa.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
It's a pleasure. I am looking forward to this because I really struggle with time management as someone who had, busy mum, two children, 5 and under, and running my own business. It's like all the plates spinning in the air at all times. And I really love what you do. And I followed you for a while and we're in the same kind of business mentoring group. So, I do really know what you do really works. So I think there's a lot that you're going to be able to talk to us today that is going to help other busy mums. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us a bit more about yourself and how you got interested in time management.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so yes, as you say, I work with overgiving female founders of purpose-driven businesses to really unlock their productivity potential to achieve their goals, but it's without the frazzle or the burnout. My backstory is I used to work in fundraising. Very passionate about the work I did. Really cared about the missions of the two organisations I worked for, and I didn't manage my time very well because I wanted to raise money. I mean, there's like one example of a Friday night when I was in the office. There were two of us left. The lights weren't really working so well because there wasn't much motion, and they were like motion sensors. And my colleague was like, "Louisa, why are you still here?" And I was like, "Well, the longer hours I work, the more money I can raise for charity." And that's not true, because there's a law of diminishing returns where the longer you work, the less productive you're going to be. So there were various sort of times when I worked very long hours. I even missed one of my leaving dues because I'd worked too many hours, and that wasn't a great place to be. And then I finished working my corporate 9 to 5 job, and I decided to become a coach. And then I was thinking, oh my goodness, okay, now I've got all the time in the world to choose how I want to spend my time. And that was almost when the problem started, because I'd lost that structure and that framework of the corporate 9 to 5. And I remember saying to a colleague on a yoga retreat, or a friend on a yoga retreat, I don't know how to structure my day. And I think she thought, oh, is that a problem? And it was, yes. And I think for many of us, once we become moms, where we've got our own businesses, we suddenly have all these choices, and that can be quite, yes, it gives us freedom, but also it's like, what do I do? What's the best way of using my time? And so that got me really thinking about what does time mean to me? How can I use it well? When are my energy highs and lows? I mean, I don't want to say too much because this is only like the introduction, but as someone who's always been a process geek, always wanted to look at how to create efficiencies in the system, so to speak. Suddenly I was like, so how do what are the inputs that I need to enjoy my day and not feel frazzled at the end of it? So it's been a real experiment over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I really identify with all of that, in terms of kind of working in a job where you kind of overgive because you feel like you're doing good, but
Yeah.
then you're not really being paid for all that extra overtime. And I think it's really interesting. You talked about the law of diminishing returns and how like the more you work, the actual less productive you are. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe we'll get into that in a bit. But I think the other thing I really identify it with is as a mum, and you lose that structure. I mean, first in maternity leave, but also often we go back to work, or we start our own business part time. So, working 3 days a week or 4 days a week, or working like compressed hours is really common as well, where you work, a 5 day week in 4 days. So you're working long days. Or, you suddenly have this flexibility to maybe work, late at night or around school drop off. And it's like, you're right. Like you struggle without when you suddenly don't have this structure and routine that has been imposed on us. Like it's a very like patriarchal like
Definitely.
structure, a very male centric structure, because it doesn't actually align with our natural kind of energy and productivity as women anyway. But especially the busier you get and the more like work outside of your kind of official work you take on in terms of household and family and all that. So this is all really interesting. I'm so excited. um, but why do you think so many of us struggle to prioritize our time?
Well, I think you've kind of summed it up with everything that you've just described in terms of, as women, what's kind of expected of us, and what we kind of maybe expect of us ourselves, even though we should be encouraging our partners to be maybe helping a bit more with the household, and many of them do. So let's not make an assumption that they don't. But I think as women, we're very giving. We want to do the best for our families. You know, if we have a small business, again, we want to put everything into it. But I think what often happens is, and I've noticed this in myself, is that we set ourselves unrealistic goals and expectations of what we can do. And so then it means that we maybe don't have a really like tight framework. We don't really know where our time's going. We're saying yes to everything. And I guess as particularly, well, as moms, you know, we want to be, I'm not a mom myself, so this is me thinking about it from the perspective of my friends. Maybe they want to get to meet other moms because they don't want to be just at home with their kids. It's really important they get out, so maybe they're going to lots of different meetings. They want to do for the best for their kids as well, and to give them amazing opportunities. All these things take time. Their businesses, particularly when they're sort of in their infancy, it's really hard to know what to say yes to and what not to. I have been, and because yeah, you've talked about this wellness business group we were part of. Before that, I was such a magpie for all the freebies, the books, the courses, and it's really hard to decide which things are actually important. So I think what often happens is we're not clear on our goals. We say yes to too many things. We don't have those boundaries. We want to do everything because that's what society says we should be doing. That maybe if we're not doing everything, that somehow that means that we're, I don't want to use the word failure, but I think that's sometimes how I feel like we're somehow a failure because we're not doing all these things and we're not doing them perfectly. But that's, as you say, it's like the patriarchal society coming down on us. What I care about is what works for us, what feels good to us. And particularly if we have a business on the side of also being a mom, which is an amazing privilege, an amazing thing to do that can take so much time and energy. But if we want to run a business as well, yeah, it's really important that we know what's going to start to make the difference and to move the dial and to be kind to ourselves at the same time. So I think those are some of the key things. And I guess, yeah, having a lack of focus, which again, as a small business owner at the beginning, it's really hard to know where to focus our attention because everything could potentially bring us a result. So I think some of those things are key things. And also not having a proper plan. um, as someone who loves time management, it's only been in the last few weeks that I've actually started to really tie myself down into a weekly working plan. And I feel almost it's a bit crazy to be admitting this, that I maybe people would expect that I would be even
Yeah.
like more organized with my time. And I can tell you more about that in a minute if you like, but just really trying to get clear about what's realistic can really help us to have a week that feels less stressful and less overwhelming. But that's a whole other topic we can come back to if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I really like about you actually, is the fact that you're quite open about saying, I'm still working this out. Like I have worked, I've tried these things, I've tried this method, and I have become aware that recently you've been looking at this kind of weekly plan, which does make a lot more sense to me. And I think especially if you're working part-time or you're trying to fit it around all these other responsibilities, it does make sense to have a more overarching weekly kind of plan that you can then slot things in when
Yeah.
they come, rather than saying, well, every single day I have to do this between this time and this time. And then you're like, oh, well, on Tuesday we go to gymnastics at that time. So that's not going to work. But I know Kate Northrup talks about that as well, about kind of having a weekly plan as opposed to like a daily, like specific. So I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting that you'd come to that same conclusion yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
I love her work, but I didn't know that that's what she's an advocate for. So I'm quite glad to have come at that myself. And I think because I'm a coach, and I'm not sure if I actually mentioned that at the beginning. I just talked about who I work with, but I didn't sort of say how. Because I'm a coach, I'm never going to tell people what to do.
yeah.
And what I love about the conversations I have and the training I do is I'm sharing ideas and thoughts, but I'm never saying, Tasha, this is what you need to do. It's my questions would be, so Tasha, what works for you? When are your kind of optimum hours for like really getting stuff done? If you only have a couple of hours in the day, if you could choose those hours, when would they be? And how would you use them? And how do you want to spend your breaks to help you to feel energized, rather than, okay, based on what I've learned, you should be doing this at this
Yeah.
hour, or this is the kind of exercise you should be doing to re-energize. No, no, because then I get the dopamine hit rather than you. And then you're like, oh, I don't want to do the thing that I've been told to do. And then you're not going to be excited. I want my clients to be excited because they're tapping into what works for them. We're all different. And as we've already said, it feels like when we're in those corporate 9 to 5 jobs, we should be doing certain things at certain times, and we should be always on our email. And I'll always remember one of my colleagues, she'd only check her emails like between 2 and 3 every afternoon, and that was in her signature. And I thought that was brilliant. And I mean, there's no reason why we should be on our email all the time. Maybe we feel we should be, because otherwise, if we're not, our bosses might be like, why isn't she responding to my email immediately? Whereas for her, she's like, that's my focus time. That is the time I'm going to do that thing. So the more that we can really tap into what works for us rather than what we feel we should be doing, then we're going to get our best work done in the way that we want to do it, and we're going to enjoy it.
Yeah. And the thing that really kind of sprung to mind when you were talking about that is the fact that you get a lot of these kind of instructions about how to have a really productive morning. Like, get up at 5, do some meditation, do some journaling, do some yoga. And all these all these mums are like, yeah, but do you know what? I've been woken up 5 times in the night and 5 o'clock for the first time. My baby's actually asleep. I'm not going to drag myself out of bed. And I think that is really interesting because there is a lot of guilt of like, oh, I'm to be as successful as, whoever, I should be doing this. And I think this is really interesting because when I all through uni and my masters, I always was most productive at 5 in the morning. Like it would work really well for me to wake up at 5, just start, like, maybe
Yeah.
have a shower, make a cup of tea, but just start working straight, studying straight away. And then I'd work through until midday, and then I'd have the whole of the rest of the day off. And to me, that was amazing because I could never work late at night. I'd have all these friends who'd be like, oh, I'm going to pull an all-nighter in the library, and I was like, why? What about sleep? Sleep has always been really important to me.
Me
But I
too.
can't do that now as a mum. Like I can't actually wake up at 5 and do that work, even though I know that would actually probably be I'd get more work done if I could work between 5 and 7 than if I, had the rest of the day to do it. So how do you kind of help people work through that if they know that actually I am really productive first thing in the morning, but that's just not going to work for me at this point in my life?
Yeah. And I guess, as you say, it depends on where you're at in your life. And I guess if things have changed, then okay, so if you can't do it, then when are the other times when you can? And I appreciate when you have a little one who may nap at slightly different times every day, then it's kind of tricky. So I suppose it's really about noticing what you notice. Um, Maybe over the course of a week, kind of looking at, okay, so these are the times when I can work, but how many hours do I actually want to be working?
Yeah.
And which of these hours are feeling right for me? And I guess it's really important that you retain that. Well, that you need to be flexible because I guess, well, mums know it better than anyone. I think you can't kind of, for me, I know that I can pretty much sort of guarantee I can do my work at these times. But as a mum, I guess it's like, okay, let's be realistic about what I can achieve this week. And then I'm going to just have to slot it
Yeah.
in around the times when my baby's napping, for example. But I think the more that you can maybe plot out what a week's kind of looking like, when those gaps are, when your baby's sleeping, for example. And it might be that if if you haven't had a good night's sleep, then you're not going to want to work.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, because I think for me, what's really important is that we enjoy the work we do, that we're in the right headspace. We come to those sessions, whether they're a half an hour session or a 2 hour session, depending on when our baby's napping, and that we come in the right mindset. So I think it also relates to how are we coming to those sessions, if they're 30 minutes or 2 hours, what can we do to set ourselves up so that we have a successful session? Do we need to do some deep breaths rather than like, oh, the baby's now asleep, let's kind of rapidly get
Yeah.
into something, because we're not necessarily going to get into the right mindset. So I think the key things are accepting that things need to be flexible and adaptable, and not necessarily pushing ourselves that every time our baby's napping that we're doing a certain thing, but knowing what the order of priorities are, so we can then figure out, okay, so if my baby's napping in the afternoon, how am I in, what are my energy levels like? And again, they're going to change depending on what your sleep has been like the night before, and what kind of work do I want to do based on if I feel a bit sluggish or if I've actually got really good energy, what the kind of tasks that again I'm going to enjoy most, rather than saying I need to do this thing now because it's a priority. It's like, well, actually, I might not feel like I'm in the mood for it and I'm not going to do my best work. So I hope that
Yeah. No,
makes
and you know, that is such a bit of a light bulb moment, that kind of list of priorities. Because, you know, even if you're not kind of running your own business or doing work around the baby's nap, I mean, there's a real cliche, I don't know if that's the right word, like meme, I guess, or real that people kind of do where like, baby's napping, quick, what do I do? Do I, you know, wash up? Do I do the laundry? Do I do some self-care? Do I do some yoga? Do I do some exercise? And then you end up being so overwhelmed by
yeah,
all the things you could be doing that you end up
yeah,
just scrolling on Instagram because you can't
yeah,
and it's like,
yeah.
and then the baby's awake, and you're like, well, I missed that window.
So
So,
maybe, sorry, this is me being a super geek. I guess what could be quite cool is like having a list, and I don't know if this is too much detail of, okay, so this is, if this is how I feel, so I feel I've got high energy. It's almost like maybe I don't know, maybe it's like a quadrant. So if I've got high energy and I've got like a half an hour window, these are types of tasks that I could do. If I've got low energy in a half an hour window, then I'm going to do this. And actually, I'm a real advocate now. Been reading some a book by Ali Abdaal, and I've mentioned him a few times in some of our training sessions. And he talks about when we have a break to do something energizing. Now, I'm not saying that in every break I used to take, I was on sort of Instagram or whatever, but sometimes I'd be checking my email or doing something else. Where he's like, do something energizing. So now I do housework or the washing up. A few
mm,
weeks ago, my partner said to me, "Do you want me to do the washing up today?" I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm saving that for one of my breaks." And the excitement, the excitement I had was, yeah, a little bit too much. But it's just, it felt like I'd be on my feet. I was doing something fulfilling, and it was kind of energizing. So I think it's like almost having a quadrant of, if I've got high energy for half an hour, what can I do? If I've got high energy for 2 hours, what are the kind of things I can do? So as you say, it's like you then have one less decision to make. I'm a big fan. I think we make between, it's about 30 to 60,000 decisions every day. It's ridiculous. It's like in the tens of thousands. So another thing I really want to help people do is in those moments or half hour sections or slots, let's not spend half that time trying to think what to do.
yeah.
What can we do to like take the decision making out of it? Because again, as a mom, if you're sleep deprived, then you're not necessarily going to be always doing your best thinking because you're tired. So let's try and take some of the decision making out of it so that you can enjoy that time, whether it be doing some work or actually taking some time for yourself, which is so
Mm.
important. Napping maybe at the same time as your baby. I know that people are often advocates for that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of realistic word that's come up quite a few times is so, so true, because I think that is part of the problem. You just think, well, she's napping. I don't know how long for. It could be half an hour, it could be 2 hours. And it's like, well, you know, I could do this job and this job and this job and this job and this job. And then you end up feeling disappointed because she's woken up half an hour later
Yeah.
and you've actually spent most of that time trying to decide what to do. I love the idea of the quadrant. I actually had in mind like a flow chart. It'd be like, do you have high energy
Yes,
today? Yes, no.
it's even better. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, love it.
And
Um,
that's the kind of thing I could, work with clients on to kind of create that flow chart. What are those questions, and what are the answers that
yeah,
come?
brilliant. I love that. So you mentioned self-care, and I think that is a key one. And I know you talk about self-care quite a lot as part of having a productive day. So
Definitely.
let's talk through about the role of self-care and kind of rituals in kind of making your day feel fulfilling. I don't want to say productive because I feel like you can be very
Yeah,
fulfilled having a
yeah,
day where you just sit at home. Like you don't have to feel like be productive all the time. So let's say fulfilling. So
yeah,
what are the foundations of a fulfilling day?
yes. And I'm glad you said that, because I have I don't know, a bit of a love-hate relationship with the word productive, because again it feels very capitalist. We've got to have achieved XYZ. But I guess for a lot of my clients, it's the kind of thing that they're thinking about and looking for. So yeah, I'm glad you called that out, because for me, fulfilling is a much better term. So I think again, it's kind of like, what are we putting into the system, so to speak, that's going to help us to have that fulfilling day? And I think, as you say, it starts with some morning rituals for me anyway, and I guess it's a personal thing, but hopefully this is something that would appeal to your listeners too. So it's about how do we sort of set ourselves up for a really good day? How do we want to land when we come to our desks and open our laptops? And I'm sure that people don't want to be coming to their laptops thinking, oh my goodness, I've got all these things to do. Not only have I got to look after my child, she's going to be back from nursery in a few hours. I've got all these other things to do. I'd love for people to come to their work thinking, I'm just really excited about what I'm going to be doing next. So how do we get that feeling? It might be through a meditation, which again can be just for 5 to 10 minutes. It could be some journaling. These are kind of classic things. It could be some deep breaths. But again, it's a really personal thing. And I don't want to be saying this is what you should do. It's about what works for you. It could be, if you don't have a weekly plan yet, writing down the kind of priority tasks and maybe looking at those tasks and thinking, which one am I actually most excited about doing today? So that would be the first thing. And as I say, ideally having some kind of work plan, because I didn't realize this or didn't think about it. I did a poll for this for a mini training I did a few weeks ago, and it was about distractions. What is your biggest distraction? So it could be interruptions from loved ones or notifications on your phone or emails. And the one that came up top was actually not having a plan. And I get that if we don't have a plan for the day ahead, or we don't have a plan for that half an hour or 2 hour window that we have when our baby's sleeping, then we can end up, I don't really want to say the word sort of wasting time, but I guess we're not using the time in the way we'd like to. We're not using that way in a fulfilling way. So if we can have some kind of work plan, that can really help our minds to have, again, a few less decisions to make. So I've mentioned morning rituals. I've mentioned some kind of work plan. We talked a little bit about, is the 5 a.m. start what we want to do? When are our optimum work sort of power hours? And they're typically a couple of hours in the day. So how do we make sure that we really protect those? And rather than using them maybe just for our emails, which yes is an important task, but I'd say that if we want to, the best way of using that time is really for a challenging task, something that maybe we're a bit sort of like, I don't know, we're feeling like we need to put our best energy into it. So really tap into those power hours and protect them to do those really challenging tasks. And as I've already said, self-care is really important. So not only is it that morning ritual that could be for 5-10 minutes, again, it's how much time we have, taking regular breaks. And the research says that ideally we should be taking regular breaks every 75 to 90 minutes. Again, another honest moment or of what happened to me recently. So I was involved in I was doing a really big project. I was promoting a masterclass and promoting my work in that masterclass, and I did a sort of LinkedIn Live before that. And it was quite an intense couple of weeks of not only delivering on these things, but also promoting them and following up. And again, full disclosure, the LinkedIn Live is all about the importance of the things I'm talking about, and particularly like taking regular breaks. But for whatever reason, I decided over those couple of weeks, I can reduce the level of the length of those breaks, and I'll just work slightly longer into the evening. It'll be fine. I'll do a little bit of work at the weekend, and it's only for a short amount of time. And I was exhausted at the end of this couple of weeks of work, not only because the work was really intense, but it's also because, and I think it was fundamentally because I wasn't taking those regular breaks. And it's just so important, and it's really interesting what happens when you, at the end of the day, if you haven't taken a break. And it's interesting the conversations we often have with ourselves. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter, or oh, what I'm doing is kind of like being on a break. But for me, it's really fundamental if we're going to enjoy the work we do and to not get frazzled and to not end up missing out on time with our families and missing out on time, doing other things that we love, because it's all about having an ecosystem, and they all work hand in hand. What's the point in working really long hours if we can't enjoy the fruits of our labors? So regular breaks is like always going to be front and center. And I know for mums that's not always easy. And I guess then I'd be saying, okay, if you can have like 5 to 10 minute breaks from time to time, and when your partner comes home, if you can hand over the baby just so you can have some time for yourself, it's so important. But I know it's easier said than done sometimes. So those are some key things.
Yeah, and also like I think you said right at the start about the fact that rather than when baby is napping, getting straight into into your work or whatever it is, like having that little short period where you do some breath work or journaling or whatever it is that is going to get you kind of in the right mindset. It's a similar kind of thing, really, of like going, rather than rushing from task to task as a mum,
Yeah,
whether it's, right, we're back, go to pick up school, come back, do homework, get dinner going, like between each task, what can you do to kind of have a micro
yeah,
moment, a micro pause, rather than
definitely.
just going from straight to straight, straight, and then just you because what often happens, you get them into bed, you get them to sleep, and you come home, come downstairs, and you just flop and collapse on the sofa because like this is the first time I've actually been able to sit down. But actually, if you can put those micro pauses in
Definitely.
throughout. So you talked about taking a break every 90 minutes. How long a break do you like? Would I know you
Yeah,
talked about kind of doing some washing up or doing a little bit of
yeah.
housework. So I love that. And actually, before we kind of go into that actual question I asked, one thing that did really kind of resonate with me in one of your trainings was talking about doing a bit of housework around work, whether it's before or in one of those little
Yeah,
breaks, as kind of a helpful way to get into that kind of fulfilling day because
yeah,
I find it really hard to work in a cluttered,
yeah.
messy environment. At the moment I'm downstairs in the living room on the dining table, and I had to do a quick mini tidy beforehand. But I think before you ever said that to me, I always felt like I shouldn't do that. I have to get straight into it, and actually seeing that as like an important setup ritual almost of like
Yeah,
clearing the space, clearing the mind made a huge
definitely.
difference.
Oh, great. And I'm really glad. I'm really
Yeah.
glad. Definitely.
So anyway, my question was, how long a break should we take every 90 minutes or so,
Okay.
75 to 90
Yeah.
minutes?
And just so in terms of where those figures came from, they came from a researcher at an American university. So I guess I'm just quoting one person who said this, and actually maybe a caveat if it's okay to mention. So that's kind of what some of the research says, that ideally we should take a break every 75 to 90 minutes. Like if we're learning a new thing, it allows us to consolidate, or our brains to consolidate that information, for example. So I guess for anyone listening who's got older kids who are studying for their GCSEs, again, it's really important that, yeah, taking breaks to consolidate that information they're learning is really important. So again, the caveat first. So even though this is what some of the research says, and I definitely know it makes a difference to me, if you're in a flow state where you're just loving what you're doing, then other people say carry on. And I guess, if you were to carry on every day, then that's not an ideal thing to do. But if there are times when you're like, well, I don't want to stop, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, then I guess I'd say, okay, if you're doing some deep work which you're really enjoying, is challenging you feel like you're really getting into it, then do carry on, but just be aware of how you're feeling. And if your brain is starting to really hurt, or you just feel like you need a leg stretch, then please do it. Because I think it's really important, particularly when we're not in that flow state and we're finding a piece of work hard. And I don't know about you, Tasha, but sometimes I can be quite stubborn. It's like, I'm going to
Yeah.
get this thing done. I said I'm going to do it and I'm going to get it done. But then if we're starting to get into that sort of more stressed state, then are we going to get our best work done? And are we going to find the solutions to our problems? And I often find that if I just step away, if I go for a walk, or even in the shower in the morning, my subconscious takes over and gives me the answer. So back to your original question. Well, this researcher I think it was Harvard or MIT, was saying that it's maybe like 15 minutes, so it doesn't need to be very long. And again, it's like, what do you need? If you've had a bad night's sleep and you actually need a nap, sometimes I take a short nap in the afternoon. Again, it's like, what's going to help to feed you, to keep your cup flowing, so that you have the energy to do the work you want to do, and the motivation. Because being a mom is I imagine, I mean, it's incredibly fulfilling, but I imagine it kind of takes a lot of energy and can maybe be quite draining at times. And it's the same running a business, that particularly in the early years, if we're still looking to find clients, we have to put so much of ourselves into it, so much energy, so much motivation. So I think when we take a break, ideally, what the research says is ideally for 15 minutes. But if we need longer, well, we're running our own businesses now. We don't have bosses who may be saying, although I don't think they say it anymore, come on, it's time to get back to work. But we may feel that we should be coming back to work at a certain time. So I think it's ideally around 15 minutes, thinking about what you want to do that's going to help energize you so that when you come back to your work, you're feeling ready to go. And if you need longer, then yeah, if you need longer, take it.
Yeah. And I think it's about knowing yourself, isn't it? About
Yeah.
really feeling into your what you need. And I think I don't know whether maybe especially as mums, but generally as women who are overgivers and people pleasers and all this, like we kind
Yeah.
of lose sense of what we actually need or what our body's actually saying or
Yes.
feeling, don't isn't it?
Yes.
And it's quite a practice to get back into that.
Definitely. And that's why I think, and one thing I learned when I was doing my coaching training, and I sort of bring into blog posts and things these days, is like, notice what you notice, reflect. If you're, as I mentioned at the beginning, before you start work, having a morning ritual can be really helpful because we come every day, we may feel different. Also, if we think about our cycles, there's a great book by Elisa Vitti called In Flow. I think have you heard of it?
Love that book. Yeah, it
And you probably know more about it than me, but I love the principles around
yeah.
it, that, we're not going to be amazing communicators the whole month. There'll be times during our menstrual cycle when we're better communicators or better planners or better creative thinkers. And so I'm just really interested in, like, yeah, tapping into things like that as well, so that we're not forcing
Yeah.
these things on ourselves, and we're just enjoying the process. And taking those micro breaks is another way of noticing what's going on for us in that moment. Because again, as a mom, I mean, I can only imagine the kind of things that could come up from, like, oh, my baby's now slept for half an hour rather than 2 hours, or now I need to take them to the doctors because there's something wrong. I'm worried about their cough, or there's an emergency at school. I've got to pick up my daughter from school. All of those things will, like, have an impact on how we're feeling. So I think if we can take micro breaks between each of those things, and just notice, okay, I'm feeling quite stressed right now. What's the best thing I can do for myself, rather than just ignoring it and just like, oh, I've just got to get on with the next thing. If we can take micro breaks, then at least we can notice what's happening. We might not be able to solve it, but at least we know what's going on, and then we become more in tune with what we then need. So again, these are just things where I feel like I don't have the answers, and I would never want to as a coach. It's more about helping my clients to tap into what do they need at that moment.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting that you said that about being about a coach and how it's not about telling people what to do, because it can be so frustrating because sometimes you're like, just tell me what to do. Like, I just don't know. And those questions are really hard, the sorts of questions that you ask. And I think again, we're very used to being on a very surface level awareness of ourselves and what our body is saying. And when you ask those kind of very deep coaching questions, I mean, I remember working with a coach once, and she'd ask me, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just don't know. And it would often be like after the session, much later on,
Yeah.
maybe when I was going for a walk, as you said, like I was like, oh yeah, okay, I get it now. Maybe that's what she was getting at, or maybe that is what I need, or
Yeah.
that is my answer without realizing. Um, but they are tricky questions, and I think is yeah, it's hard to get to tune in and to know what 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 you need or what the answer might be for you. And also accepting that it might not be a single answer or a
No.
single decision. You might have to try a few things.
Yeah. But I think it all starts with awareness, and the more aware we can be, then we're more able to then make those decisions, that are right for us. So there's, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I'd also be a bad coach if I had the answer on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
And I guess as a sort of practicing coach, then there probably were times when it's like, oh, I know the answer, but then you really don't. And then you kind of you lead that person down a certain path. But I mean, through the content I write, I guess that gives me a chance to sort of talk about my experiences or share some ideas and theories. But I guess I really want to kind of keep things open for my clients as much
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah, no, so I think coaching is such an interesting skill, really, and it is a huge, massive skill to do that, to rein back from, well, I know what you should be doing, kind of feeling, because that is what that's often how I feel
Yeah.
in my work. So that is really interesting to kind of allow them to come to their own conclusion. Because you said, like, everyone is so different and has their own responsibilities and priorities and all of these things, completely different life that you can't
Yeah.
have the answer.
No, and how often do you take the advice that someone's kind of told you? I mean, how often when we're told to do something, do we actually want to do it? Um, there's often a bit of a, I'm not sure if I want to, particularly if it's maybe from like our, I don't know, our parents or something, and they feel like they know the right answer. Whereas if you come up with it, it's like this is I'm really tapping into what who I am, and now I'm really excited to do it because I've come up with this idea myself.
Yeah.
And so there's that,
Yeah.
that I love the whole dopamine hit thing, that can really then motivate us, particularly if it's something that maybe we don't want to do.
Yeah. And exactly. And accepting that, maybe we have been people pleasers a lot of our life, and actually saying yes to ourselves and no to other people
Yeah.
is okay, and brings its own set of happiness and fulfillment and joy in a different kind of way. But yeah, interesting. Let's really briefly talk about working in alignment with our natural rhythms, because you talked a bit about kind of working in your cycle and how you have some
Yeah.
parts of your cycle where you are kind of a bit more into communicating, and other times where you might be more into reflecting. But what does working in alignment with a natural rhythm mean to you, and how do you help clients kind of do that?
I guess it's kind of what we've been talking about already. It's about not sort of presenting my clients with, okay, so you've told me that these are all the thing all your goals, and this is how you should like kind of create a plan, and this is what your structure should be for your week, and this is what you should be doing at this time. I mean, that's an exaggeration. I mean, I would never do that, but in terms of like that could be one way of doing things, and maybe a business mentor could support somebody, and sort of say, I think this is how you should sort of map out your week. Great, and for some people that might work, but for others it's like, no, that's not going to work for me. This is how I work personally. Actually, I can work for 2 hour stretches without feeling exhausted,
Mm.
as long as I do these other things. Or actually, for me to be able to write some content for my website or for my blog post, I really have to do all of these other things in order to get to that position where I feel like I'm ready, and this is the best time of day to do it. So I think for me it's about tapping into what are our energy highs and lows during the day. How do we conserve and keep that energy flowing? Because I want my clients, I want anyone who's listening to what we're talking about this morning to still have a fairly full cup, as realistic as that can be by the end of the day. I don't want us to be using all of our spoons, if people are familiar with that analogy, or everything that's in our cup for our work. And so how do we kind of create those natural, how do we tap into those natural rhythms that we all have? And are there certain foods that work really well for us in keeping our energy going, keeping us focused? So for me it's about when are our how what are our optimum hours, how many hours can we actually work, um depending on the day of the week, or depending on how well our babies slept. What work really fulfills us? What's interesting to us? How can we? I mean, I hope this kind of relates to the kind of the question. If we're doing marketing for our businesses, for example, what really excites us? I mean, there's lots of things we could do. But what do we actually enjoy doing? What interests our brains? What gets us motivated? So again, it's just thinking about what works for us. What is the flow that works for us? How often do we need to take those breaks? How long do we want to work for? So again, it's all about listening to ourselves and what motivates us, what energizes us, what keeps us, what's moving in a positive way that allows us to have a day that's fulfilling, as you were saying before, and allows us to also enjoy our evenings. And what are the activities that help us to get to that point? And what are the kind of things that we want to do with our
Yeah.
evenings as well?
Yeah. And do you know what I think is so interesting about that is, we talk about working for a living, but don't really think about what that living really means. Like, what actually, because we work for a living and we can often end up kind of working, for 50 years of our lives, and
Yeah,
then suddenly and be like, well, I can live after that. I'm like, well, do you really want to start living at sort
yeah,
of 60, 70 years old? I mean, that's not really a great kind of working for a living sort of mindset.
No, be kind of
So I
like
think
working for a fulfilling life, I guess, not just for those
yeah,
those hours and
yeah,
days.
exactly. And it is hard because you are balancing this sense of I want to have a fulfilling life. I want to have a meaningful time with my family and feel really present with them so that I'm in the moment enjoying it and having a fulfilling time, but also go, but I also need to earn money
Yeah.
to live, to, to allow those times together. So it is a bit of a kind of balance, isn't it, between those decisions, I suppose, that you have to make.
Yeah, and I guess it's also, as you say, what is the work that we're doing and how fulfilling is it? And if it's not fulfilling us, if it's not filling up our cups and allowing us to enjoy our evenings with our families, then what is more fulfilling? And I know it's not always easy to kind of move jobs, particularly when you've got a young family, because you have responsibilities. But I think we work for such a long time, the more that we can tap into what's of interest to us that really floats our boat, what we
Yeah.
really enjoy, the better. But I know that's often easier said than done. But again, it's like, what do we enjoy doing? Giving ourselves a chance to really think about, yeah, I really enjoy that kind of thing. How can I bring that more into the work that
Yeah.
I do?
Yeah. And I think as well, there is like this, talking about the balance, the guilt of wanting to be at work because that does give you fulfillment and joy
Yeah,
because you're good at it, or it does give you this kind of flow, or because yeah, it's outside of your life as mum and it is
yeah,
like a
yeah,
whole nother life.
yeah,
But then this guilt of, but then when I'm working, I'm not with my child, and that's what,
yeah,
I'm supposed to be doing because I'm a parent.
yeah,
Um, but also similarly, a lot of people have a lot of fulfillment in their job before they have children, and then
yeah,
they have children and suddenly think, actually, that doesn't feel as fulfilling and fun and joyful
yeah,
as my life now. And then it's like, I think there's a lot of sort of guilt there of, well, I'm kind of, you know, failing the sort of feminist sort of movement because now I'm like, I want to be at home with my children. And it's like, yeah, your head explodes really, I think, as your mum sometimes.
yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
Um, so let's sort of wrap things up. What are your top 3 tips for overgiving females like mums
Mhm.
to start finding that alignment with your natural flow and designing a day or a week that feels fulfilling?
So I think, as we've spoken about, yeah, we've talked about quite a lot today. It's about taking that time to notice what's going on for you, and I guess that begins at the beginning of the day before you start your day, and choosing some kind of grounding activity that really helps you before you open your laptop, whether it's for half an hour or 20 or 2 hours. How am I coming to this sort of session of work? And it could be, as I say, like some kind of journaling or meditation or deep breaths, and it doesn't have to take long, but it's really allowing you to notice what's going on. And to do that for each of those mini sessions that you're doing throughout the day when you're going back into your work, and even when you're going between tasks, as you say. So I think the more we can tap into how we're feeling, taking some time for ourselves, even if it is just for a few minutes, is a really helpful place to start. I think it's about also taking regular breaks so that we're not kind of feeling like we're forcing our brains to work, and to really choose, where we can, the activities that really kind of bring that joy to us, because we do have choices often. For example, if we're running a business and we're doing the marketing, that what are things that really light us up, that feel like they're in flow and in tune with who we are, where we're really able to be creative. So whether or not it's like writing a newsletter or a blog post or something on Instagram, whatever it is that really works for you. So trying to be in tune with your kind of creative juices. And as well as that, tapping into how do you get to that point where you can really let those creative juices flow. So I think those are the kind of 3 things. If I summarize, it's choosing a morning ritual that really helps to set you up for the day, making the most of those micro breaks during the day so that you can tap into how you're feeling at that given moment. Because as a mum and a business owner, there's so many things going on. Um, and yeah, choosing tasks that are really in alignment with what interests you, where you have choices about how you spend your time, and thinking about how you tap into those creative juices to really make them flow. And it could be to do with taking those regular breaks or choosing the time of day. when it's best for you to work on those particular tasks, because there could be. So for me, just very briefly, I used to write a lot of content in the afternoon after my afternoon slump. And then I suddenly thought, actually, content right now for me is still quite a challenging thing. I'm still learning how to do it. Let's move that to the morning when I have a little bit more energy and focus. So it's just things like that. When are the best times to do those tasks that, yeah, bring with it certain challenges?
Yeah, 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 amazing. No, I think that's really good, really helpful tips. So yeah, thank you so much. So if listeners want to learn more about you, find out more, where can they find you?
So I have a website, which is just my name, louisadaubney.co.uk. Likewise for Instagram, and LinkedIn, I'm there as Louisa Daubney Time Design Coach. And then I've got a sort of a freebie, which kind of like really reflects some of the conversations we've had today, which is all about how to unlock your productivity potential. Maybe I should change it to fulfillment potential. And it's like just 10 questions which are focusing on sort of 5 essential practices that can really help to set us up for a positive day ahead. So
Yeah,
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 I'm going to share a
amazing.
link to
Some of those tricky coaching questions that make you think.
that. Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Louisa, for sharing, your top tips and your work with us.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me on today, Tasha. It's been a real pleasure. I love talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, I know. I love it too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.